What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Ralph Hanna. And guys, here we are, right in the middle of the international break. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be super boring here on Guarani Vision. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of games that will obviously be contested, whether it be in the next few days, in the next few months, or whatever it may be. We'll definitely talk about it here. We're going to talk about what's been going on with the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana, as we saw the draw happening in the CONMEBOL headquarters in Luque to see what the Paraguayan team's fate is going to be. We'll talk about also the Olympic team, the Paraguay Olympic team that will be participating in France, what their group will be and their chances of getting out of it and moving forward. And of course, looking forward to the Paraguay-Russia game, the first game of the year under Gani Ganerdo as they continue to prepare for the Copa America that happens here in the United States. So, Fede, I'll go to you on this one. It's been a lot that's been going on, even in international break. There's a lot been going on. I know that we've also had some, we'll talk about it later with Ralph, but just some beef going on with other countries. I mean, so much for what should be a quiet week with no local league, nothing like that. But hey, there are things going on in the world of football.
Yes, definitely. Hi, Roberto. Hi, Rap. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. Like always, like every week, here we are again talking about the Paraguayan football. And yeah, I mean, this got heated up pretty fast in the Libertadores after the draw, right? After we saw the groups that each Paraguay team is going to have to face. Each team, very interesting. Boca River, two of the biggest teams in the continent, are going to be here in Paraguay playing. One in Sudamericana, the other one in Libertadores. We're going to look into that, into every team, what chances they really have of going through in their groups, and obviously talk about everything that's been going on so far in the Apertura. Also, even though we do have a break right now this weekend, it's been 10 games already. Libertad is unstoppable, still the only unbeaten team in the Apertura. Olimpia has now taken the second spot away from Dos de Mayo after facing them last weekend. We had Luqueño also going against Cerro Porteño. Cerro Porteño ended up beating Sportivo Luqueño. Those were two teams. I'm talking about Dos de Mayo and Luqueño. They had a big chance of staying there really close to the leader, Libertad, but they let go of that chance against the big team. So it looks like they're still in the race for the title. I'm talking about Olimpia and for Cerro Porteño, especially because next week, when the local football comes back, Olimpia is going to have to face Libertad. So that's going to be an interesting match, definitely, to see if Libertad is still going to be up there and not having anybody bothering them. Even though this weekend we will have a break, no football around here in Paraguay, we're going to look into that Olympic friendly game that will play Dominican Republic here in Paraguay. Hopefully people will go to that game because we haven't been able to be close to that Olympic team ever since they took the gold medal from the Pre-Olímpico. Now we want to see them in France. We know which teams they're going to go up against. And after seeing the draw, Roberto, I'm sure Kylian Mbappé is really happy. He doesn't have to face the South American champions, Paraguay, because it was a probability that we were going to have to face the local national team, France. But thankfully that did not happen. We will have to face the champions from Asia, the champions from Africa. But that's what's going to happen in the Olympics very soon. And we have the game against Russia. Probably not the happiest or safest place to play a football match nowadays, but Paraguay is there. They've been training these last couple of days, and I'm so excited to see Julio and Ciso and the boys kicking it once again.
Absolutely. That's a lot that's going to be happening this weekend. As we saw this week, Ralph, we saw obviously a mention, of course, of some geopolitical discussions, you would say, happening with Cerro Porteño and some Argentines. And we'll talk about that in a sec, but also what's been going on with the women's team, the women's U17 team. They're in the next stage of the CONMEBOL U17 tournament, which means they will go to the Final Four, and the top three of those Final Four will go to the Women's World Cup in the Dominican Republic. So at least there's some sort of exciting times and kind of eyes open for a lot of Paraguay teams and players, whether it be in Russia, in Paraguay, or wherever in the world.
Yeah, that's right, Roberto. Hi, everybody. A lot going on because, like Fede mentioned, of the game against Dominican Republic with under 23s, the under 17 Sudamericano is in Paraguay right now. So Paraguay have been hosting this tournament, and the girls are doing really well, other than maybe 5 to 6 minutes at the end of the game against Ecuador, where they let a 2-goal lead slip and they drew 2-2. They've been pretty much perfect, and they pulled off the win last night against Chile to confirm their place in the Final Four. Alison Barreiro, she scored the penalty, and it was very kind of coolly taken, because there's a lot of pressure on that moment, right, to make sure you put that penalty away and send your team through. And we were just talking right offline that this is a great chance to go to the World Cup, the Under-17s World Cup, which is 3 of the 4 teams can qualify. And the last time Paraguay went was 2016, when it was hosted in Jordan. And that's when you have a lot of the team that we just saw in the Women's Gold Cup. So you have people like Limpia Freites, you have Jessica Martinez, of course, Rosa Minho. They were all in that 2016 World Cup, got that experience, and now they're the ones trying to take things to the senior team. So I think it's very positive for Paraguay that they're doing well, and then you're hopefully pushing through some of this new generation. And before we move on, I wanted to give a shout out, because this week, talking about geopolitical, but this is very cool. I got a photo from India, from Delhi, the capital of India, of a listener to Guarani Vision. So we'll give him a shout out, Shivam Singh. He had a Luqueño shirt and a Guaireña shirt, because he's a big fan of Paraguayan football since following, I think, the 98 World Cup. He said it was a big part of his childhood. And so he's very happy that he gets to listen to Guarani Vision and Paraguayan football in English.
That is amazing. That is amazing to hear that, Fede, we get fans worldwide, all over the world. We get, obviously, people from the United States, from the United Kingdom, Europe, all around South America, but now one from India as well.
These things still shock me. We've been doing these podcasts for years now, but we still get people from all over the world sending us their greetings, sending us their support also to keep on going, because we got to tell people, Roberto, we do this because we love football, because we love Paraguayan football, because we love it. We don't do it for the money. We don't do this every week because there's something behind it. We do it because we love getting together and talking about the Paraguayan football. And it's great to have other Paraguayan fans of football around the world, even though they're not from Paraguay. They love Paraguay. They love the Paraguayan football, maybe because they followed the national team, maybe because they have followed a good run from a Paraguayan team in the Libertadores. That's happened a lot with Olympia fans around the world too, because Olympia is one of the biggest teams. But I'm happy to see somebody put a Luqueño shirt, a Guaireña shirt all over on the other side of the world. And Rap's always connected with all of those kind of people through internet, through social media. So keep doing that great work, Rap, because it's very important for us to keep spreading all over the world the Paraguayan game.
Well, one thing that probably isn't going to be spread in the Paraguay love right now is what's going on in Argentina. As we go real quick before we discuss the Libertadores and the Sudamericana, there was a little bit of beef over the last few days coming from Argentina. This was pointed out by a journalist over there who had claimed, or at least has saw, that Cerro Porteño had obviously put in their map of the group stage opponents for the Copa Libertadores that we'll talk about in a sec. But in the map, there is a mention of the Falklands Islands. And, it's obviously something that obviously we're not going to get too political, but of course, Argentines are still a bit disputed on that it's theirs, that they call it Malvinas instead. And yeah, I don't know how this happened, Ralph. I want to go to you on this one, because it just happened to for this little thing, I mean, little in the case of maybe for us, maybe for not for them, that it's mentioned, and then it just exploded, that it just went through mainstream media here in Paraguay and Argentina and all across Latin America as well.
A very innocent tweet talking about just to put the context in, right? It was a map showing where Cerro are going to play their games for the Copa Libertadores and their opponents, which we're about to go into. And of course, there's no Argentinian teams. There's nothing to do with Argentina. Is a very innocent mistake. But if your eye is attuned to it, because I must say, me being British, my eye did pick that up very quickly as well, that they'd used the map where it says Falkland Islands, which is just a standard map. There's nothing crazy about it. But of course, as you know, it can be controversial in this region, and especially with Paraguay and Argentina having such close relations. So it's funny, because that tweet, just so you guys know, that I was looking back, the impressions that has now is like over 3 million. And it's more than like when Cerro won the title in the very final minute against Guarani in that crazy game. Is absolutely eclipsed the fact that Manolo Jimenez has started as new manager of Cerro Porteño. Like, that news has just kind of disappeared almost, that they've got a really top European manager in. all because of a tweet which Roberto and I know personally, the Cerro social media team. It was obviously very innocent. There was nothing, no bad intentions behind it, and it just got picked up and blown out of proportion, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Fed, if you want to chime in, this is it's basically a big mess out of nothing, basically, from the Argentine public.
Yeah, I got the same sense, obviously, right? That it was an innocent mistake that, I don't know, they picked up just a map that was in English, that they picked up a map out of the internet. Obviously, if you buy a map in Argentina, it does say Islas Malvinas because that's what they think. What's down there in the south is totally theirs. They went to a war to try to get that land back, but officially it is Britain's place right now. So if you buy a map, probably all around the world, it will say Falkland Islands. We got to be honest about that situation. You guys know that I was born in Argentina, so I kind of went through this situation. I know the history. I know what it means to the Argentinian people to talk about this. It is a very sensitive subject, but there's always people looking for trouble. There's always people looking for a mistake to call you out. And I think this was kind of that situation also, right? An Argentinian journalist looking for something to make it big, to make it viral. And yeah, obviously the Argentinians are very sensitive about the situation, but I think it was just an honest mistake. And I do think Cerro needs to say, okay, we're sorry about this, but it is officially, it is the Falkland Islands. It is run by the British government. So I understand Cerro Porteño's take on it. I understand why Paraguayans also want to defend everything that happened from this side. And yeah, there's a lot of history behind it, Roberto. I mean, most of Argentinians territory once was Paraguay. A lot of Brazilians south was part of Paraguay also before. So if we want to get into this dispute, it's going to be an everyday thing. Let us be history, and let's all be brothers. We're all from the same continent.
That is for one other podcast related to history, but that is not the case here at Guarani Vision. We talk about football. So, yeah, it was just one thing that I wanted to mention because I think it obviously was related to us. And, obviously, Cerro Porteño mentioned. So it's an interesting discussion. But we'll leave it at that as we talk about what's really been going on, what's going to happen on the pitch. Because obviously we saw the draw of the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana happen. We're going to start with, of course, I think we're going to go with the Sudamericana first. I think we're going to start off with that because we have two teams from the Copa. We have four teams actually that are going to be participating in this competition. We're going to start with the team that is in order. In Group D, we have Boca Juniors, Fortaleza, Nacional Potosí of Bolivia, and Sportivo Trinidense. That's the first Paraguayan team that will be in there. The other one that we'll have is Sportivo Almeliano, who are in the group with Atlético Paranaense, Danubio of Uruguay, and Rayo Zuliano of Venezuela. Looking at Group F, Corinthians, Argentinos Juniors, Racing, and Nacional in that group as well. And the final one with Sportivo Luqueño, Coquimbo Unido, Red Bull Ramantino, and Racing. So, I mean, right off the bat, guys, these are very difficult groups for Paraguay. All four of them. I don't think they feel as if though they're confident enough. I mean, maybe you can look at it in the case of Sportivo Avellano where they can do something against Danubio or Paranaense, but yeah, Fede, I want to go to you on this one first because they are some tough groups. And honestly, I mean, we're going way ahead and we still have a couple of weeks until the start of this group. But just looking ahead, I mean, these are tough groups. These are really tough groups. You got a lot of Argentine teams and Brazilian teams in these groups for some of these Paraguayan teams. And yeah, that's not a good sign, I'd say, for Paraguayan teams, especially with the way the format is where two teams advance to one goes to the round of 16, the other one goes to the knockout round of the playoffs. So these are very difficult groups just right off the bat, just analyzing it from a big point of view.
Yeah, but the chances have gone up for you to get through the stage, right? With two teams going through. So we had the situation with Guaireña, who a couple of years ago did a really good group stage and was not able to go through because they had a Brazilian team, I believe, in their group. Same thing as is going to happen with the Ameliano. So maybe aiming for that second spot is not such a bad thing, especially with this new format. And I do think Ameliano is going to probably aim for that because they have Paranaense in their group. I do think they can go against Danubio, go against Zuliano. These are teams that are probably more under their radar. And I'm obviously looking into the big matches, those hot tickets that we're going to have here in Paraguay, not only in Sudamericana, but also in Libertadores. But in Sudamericana, that Trinidense Boca Juniors with those same colors going up against each other is something that everybody's already talking about. I mean, Boca came here once to play against Deportivo Capital. Nobody knew who Deportivo Capital was back in those days, and Capital did a tremendous job to make a name for themselves. And up to this date, everybody still remembers what Capital did against Boca Juniors in that competition. Obviously, Trinidad also has Fortaleza to look out for. The Brazilian teams go into these international cups to win it. They don't go just to participate. So obviously, if you have a Brazilian team in your group, you have to be worried about that team and look into their stars. Nacional, I think, has it very hard with Argentino Juniors, who they've been doing really well these last 2 years. Under different coaches, but you can see that the club has been working really well, even with a couple of Paraguayans. Gabriel Avalos was the last one. He ended up changing teams this year, but Argentino Juniors is still under a very good run. Corinthians is a big team in Brazil. They're going to bring in a lot of people for the game that's going to be played in Paraguay. And the same thing with Sportivo Luqueño. Sportivo Luqueño is going to go up against a team that's been doing really well lately. Maybe these last couple of years, we haven't seen much of them. I'm talking about Racing Club de Avellaneda from Argentina, but you have also Red Bull Bragantino. That's a team with a lot of budget. That's a team that's been trying to get their first championship also, and that's a team that's aiming for the last stages of this cup. So it's very hard for all four of these teams, to be honest. But the two teams I would put my eyes on is Ameliano and Sportivo Luqueño, just for what I've seen so far, and hopefully they can keep up their form this whole year and keep on making it happen and keep on having their fans by their side. They're probably the two teams that right now are running a little bit hot. Trinidense has not been doing well in the local league, and Nacional has fallen to, I believe, the last place after these last couple of games. So it's not looking good for those two teams. I would put my eyes on Ameliano Sportivo Luqueño to do a good group stage and maybe even get the first or second spot, Roberto. Those are the two teams that I'm aiming for. Maybe they can be a surprise in the Sudamericana.
Yeah, like Fede says, it's a really tough draw because you have just so many Argentinian and Brazilian teams that you're very likely to get thrown up against at least, well, definitely one. And then in this case, a lot of times you get two in your group. And so it becomes very hard to progress. I mean, the Trinidense Boca, yeah, that stood out to me straight away because of the Capiatà that Fede already mentioned. It's 10 years ago that it happened, 2014. So it's like a nice time, I think, to come back around that you have this supposedly a small team against the giants of Argentinian football. But then what we know is Trinidense are really well organized, well run by Jose Arrua, and they did a good job in the Copa Libertadores, where again they were fighting, against above their weight class, let's say, and almost made it through to those group stages. So that would be definitely one that I've got my eye on. And then in terms of the teams that could qualify, yeah, Nacional they're probably the biggest club of the four if we think historically, but they're in the worst run of form. So and they've maybe arguably got the hardest group. So I think with all of that put together, I'm looking more towards Luqueño, Ameliano than I would have been, I think, before the draw was made. Especially Luqueño, I think is really interesting because remember, Julio Cesar Cáceres is what I would say he's a very good cup coach, right? He's proved before he's won trophies in cup competitions, or when he won the league with Olympias when it was in the pandemic when they had that strange format. So he actually won knockout games, right, to finally win the title. So I mean, he has that kind of I don't know, it's that experience as a player maybe, but just that tactical flexibility whereby when it's in those one-off games he can make the changes mid-game and do something different. So with Luqueño, I think it could be a really interesting run, and especially because we know they have such great history at home in the Sudamericana. They got to the semifinals in 2015, and even until recently their home record was really good in international competition. I think they'd only lost 2 or 3 games maybe at home in Sudamericana. I'd have to check. But they're very strong when teams come to Paraguay, and so I think I'm looking of all the four. I think Luqueño is maybe the most exciting to go through.
The only group that doesn't have our Brazilian and Argentine teams is Ameliano. They have Danubio and Paranaense. So obviously, looking ahead to that, you do need to beat one of those two to get a chance to go into the next stage. Because I think it would be too much for them to win the group. I mean, obviously they're going to go in and try to do it as best as they can. But I think realistically, when you look at these teams, they want to go for that second spot. And of course, because of that, they'll obviously face the teams who are in the third place spot in the Libertadores, which will now switch our gears to that because we'll go. Obviously, there's only two teams participating from Paraguay, so we'll take some time to analyze both of them instead of having to go straight forward. Let's go with the first one in Group A, with the reigning champions Fluminense in that group. And of course, it's Cerro Porteño that will be in that group with Fluminense, Alianza Lima, and Colo Colo, the team that actually beat Trinidense, one of the Paraguayan teams, to get there. I mean, Ralph, straight off, I think many people in social media or those even speaking within the Cerro delegation, obviously Cerro Porteño have just announced their new manager, and Manolo. I think it's a big deal, obviously, for them to get out of that group, and realistically so. I think they have a good chance to do it. Of course, Fluminense are a team that's given Cerro Porteño a lot of issues over the years. I think they played off again recently, over 3 years ago. Alianza Lima are a team that historically have always been poor in these kind of competitions. I think they have one of the worst records in Libertadores history. And Colo Colo is a team that, is a big powerhouse in South America as well. So for Cerro's case, I think they could fancy their chances, but yeah, it's going to be really tough for them to see them win this group, especially when you have the reigning champions and you have these other two teams with Alianza Lima and Colo Colo with them as well.
Yeah, that's right. But I think overall it's a good draw for Cerro because there's no easy draw. And then in this case, you get to go to Lima and Santiago. In terms of those trips are much easier than having to go to altitude or even to Venezuela. Venezuela from Paraguay is really complicated. I don't know if people realize, but it's about a 5-hour flight and there's never direct flight. So we'll talk about Libertad in a moment. It's never a particularly easy place to go. So I think now they have two like short flights, short trips. Well, three, sorry, because Fluminense as well. It's not too far. And that actually, that travel thing is people play it down sometimes, but that's going to really help them as they try and fight the two competitions because they've got to pick up some kind of form in the league as well because they've been doing so poorly. I think maybe the challenge is, of course, is now taken so long for Manolo to get in as coach because if we rewind and go back, really Jubero wanted him in September of last year, right? That was really because I remember when you look back, you think, those rumors, that's where they stemmed from. So really, it would have been perfect to have him for the end of last year, understand his team, get it set, and then have a good Copa Libertadores. Instead, of course, he has to come in and change things very quickly. Although Cerro finally won in the league, as Fede mentioned in the intro, they've really been on a poor run of form. They just haven't been able to do enough to win games. And so he has to come in very quickly and change all of that and understand what his best team is, which is also a very difficult task at Cerro because they actually have a lot of players. They have a big squad at the moment, but they haven't really defined, I think, especially in defense, what's the best way for them to go forward. So it's a lot of work to do, but I think overall the group itself is much. I don't want to say it's not easy, but it's. I think it's a very well balanced group compared to some of the things the teams that could have been thrown up, like tricky ones, teams you don't know, long trips. So I think overall they should be quite pleased with this group.
Yeah, I'm happy with Cerro Porteño got in this draw. Obviously, you were gonna get a big team. And that is Fluminense. I don't know if they're gonna aim for another championship in this Libertadores, or if they're gonna be a little bit relaxed after getting it done last year and falling short in the Clubs World Cup. But Fluminense is always a big team, and that's gonna be a hot ticket, obviously, in Cerro Porteño Stadium when they do play eventually there again. That's something that they haven't been able to do all this year yet. They're yet to play a home game. in their ground. That's going to happen when local football comes back, and when Libertadores starts, they will have their stadium totally set for these big games, and that's the only stadium they will play. That's the big difference with teams in Sudamericana, like we were mentioning before. Ameliano does not have a stadium. Trinidense does not have a stadium. Nacional has a very small stadium. Sportivo Luqueño is the only one that has an important stadium to play big games. So it is an issue for the local teams when they have to play these big games. And I do think that's an advantage, especially when you have a lot of fans by your side, which is something that Cerro Porteño is going to have to try to get before they play Fluminense, because they do have to play Colo-Colo. They have to play Alianza Lima. And I do think those are the games that you're obligated to win, especially at home, if you want to make the difference in this group. But for that, Manolo Jimenez is going to have to pick up right away with the team, with the right way of playing, and with the right strategies. I mean, this is a coach that does not have the experience in the Libertadores. Yeah, he has experience in Europa League. He has experience in Champions League even. He coached in Asia. He coached in Middle East, I believe, also. But it's his first time in South America, and I do think it's a very big challenge for a coach like him. With all the experience he had, he could easily be at home in Sevilla, done with it, and just enjoying the family time. But he wants to come to South America. He was here for about 4 months, working for Cerro Porteño. He was given hints to the coaches, the youth league coaches of Cerro Porteño. He has been working with the club, so he kind of knows where he's getting into. I think that's important, but I'm also thinking like Ralph, have they wasted time? Was it better for him to come into this team maybe in September, maybe in December? Was it another bad decision from Cerro Porteño, like they've done so many years, so many times, so many seasons, that they try to pick it up, or they try to correct themselves maybe late on this situation? We'll see. We'll see how fast Manolo Jimenez can do something with this team. I do think, like Ralph, they have a lot of players, but it's Iturbe, it's Cecilio Dominguez. Those are the best two players this team has, and those are the two players that have to show up in Libertadores if they want to have a good run and make the forward score also, because Turin has barely scored this season. Fernando Fernandez has not been running hot yet, and what I've gotten from this coach, what people have been telling me, is that he likes playing with two forwards. So I'm hoping to see that again from Cerro Porteño. Lately, they've been just playing with Turin, but maybe he even changes the way this team has been playing, not just the players themselves. And then you have a whole bunch of young players that have been coming about. Most of them have left quickly. But there are a lot of players that were playing the under-23 that are still in this squad, Roberto, that are going to play the Olympics. Maybe those will be useful players also for this new coach, and maybe they can have a great Libertadores. I'm hoping for Cerro Porteño to get on fire, to get good results quickly, because the pressure is going to be on them, especially on the players, if they don't get the results when they go back to play in their home ground.
It is always a crucial part playing in these competitions and having to get the results at home. So they have to get it fast and make sure that they can convince the public that they are a team that can be competitive. Looking at another team that will be participating in this Libertadores, Ralph, you had mentioned, I'll go to Fede on this one first, but Ralph, you had mentioned the travel time. Libertad, on the other hand, would have been lucky if they had gotten the group that they had, but with the one exception that they do have to go to Venezuela, because Libertad have been tied. They've been drawn into the group with Deportivo Táchira, Venezuela, Nacional of Uruguay, and the big powerhouse, River Plate of Argentina. And it's a similar case, Fede, I would say, for Libertad in the case of them qualifying to the round of 16, because, yes, they will have to face the powerhouse, similar to what Cedro have to face in Fluminense, but they get Nacional. This is kind of the Colo-Colo equivalent of this group. And then you have Deportivo Táchira, who are kind of the Alianza Lima equivalent of this group. So it's kind of a, like for like, you would say, group, with some exceptions, that Libertad can indeed be convinced that they can get out of this group, and it's with a favorable draw, I'd say.
I think Libertad can feel good about their group. I mean, yeah, River they won a championship not long ago. They did it, I think, in a dramatic way, getting a very late goal. They haven't been playing their best football. Their best football is under Gallardo, no doubt about it. I mean, even De Michelis has been under the rumors that he could leave River, but that title that they got a couple of weeks ago was right on time to save his spot. But Nacional barely made it. They needed the penalties to get through to this stage. You never know what you're going to get from the Venezuela team, Deportivo Táchira. Maybe they can surprise you, especially in that away match when you have to travel to Venezuela. But Libertad, I think, has to aim for that first spot, Roberto. Even though I was reading River fans making fun of Roque Santa Cruz and Tacuara Cardoso, that if you combine them, they were like 90 years old, and that Libertad has a lot of old players. I understand that situation, but Libertad has been cruising lately in the local league, and they work very well with young players. I have my doubts on defense just because I don't know if with Diego Viera and Luis Cardoso as your center backs, you can win a Libertadores. That's my big doubt. I think they had a better defense with Barbosa. Last year, he was a leader. He was very important back there. Also, with the style of play that they had, but they're getting a lot of players back from injuries. They're looking like a better team as of right now under Ariel Gariano, which is going to be one of the youngest coaches also in the Libertadores itself. He's going to probably try to make a big impact in this tournament, because Libertad has been aiming also to have a good running Libertadores these last couple of years. I think they're coming off a good Libertadores last season, and they're going to have to aim to get out of the group stage. Obviously, if not, it's going to be a total failure for them. But I think that they could go for that first spot. I mean, I understand River fans. I know that they have a tremendous team, but as of right now, River does not scare me, Ralph. I mean, this team looked a lot better under Gallardo than it has with Martin de Michelis, with the German style of play that he's brought to that team.
Yeah, and also that I think Libertad have been pretty comfortable against Argentinian teams in recent history. I'm thinking where they usually struggle are the Brazilians. I mean, that's been their undoing in Sudamericana and Libertadores in more recent years. So I think they will feel they're on a par, because talking about those players, Roque Santa Cruz, let's give him a mention for what he did in the last league game. I mean, he was just that bit of skill to open up for the goal. It's just that quality doesn't change over time, right? It doesn't age, so they can still offer a lot. And like you say, there's the young players as well with Libertad that are always coming through. You know, now it's Rodrigo Villalba, the latest kind of on this line of players, right? He's still only 17, and he's starting to get more and more game time and building himself up and coming into the team. The question mark, yeah, for sure is defense, and now they have the Martin Silva injury, which also is a well, he should be back, I guess, by the time group stages get up and running. But that whole back line is maybe where they are looking a little bit. I would say they just don't seem to have enough pace. So when you're playing against teams that are very good on the ball or can break very quickly, those two that centre back partnership is maybe not quick enough to be able to handle some of the top teams. But I do think for the group, they're in a really good position. It's just the tricky trip to Táchira, because they've played once in Venezuela, I think, against Táchira, and they lost. This is way back 2010. But they have in the past, I think, found it a bit difficult, those longer trips. But overall, yeah, they'll definitely be pushing River. Maybe they don't take the first spot, but they'll be pushing River all the way, I think, because they will definitely feel they have the quality on the pitch to go through, and they'll be very happy they've avoided a Brazilian side, because, like I say, that's where they've really struggled recently.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens to both Cerro Porteño, to Libertad, and of course the 4 Sudamericana teams representing Paraguay in the competition. So we have to wait and see what happens. We switch gears to another draw that happened this week, all the way in Paris, as we gear up for the Olympic Games that are beginning in a couple months. Paraguay have now found out their fate for the Olympic Games, and they are in a really, looking at it now, it's a very interesting group, but also a bit tricky when you think about it, because Paraguay, of course, were drawn in Group D. They did avoid France, as Fede had mentioned. That was a possibility because they were in Pot 2, which meant they could have faced Argentina and one of the 2 Asian teams. They will face one of the Asian teams, AFC 1, which is, of course, the champion of the AFC, the U23 Asian Cup that will be happening next month, actually. So they will decide their fate on who they will play. But they already know 2 other opponents. They got Mali, the third place team from the U23 Africa Cup of Nations, always a team that has a lot of talent, and Israel, a team that, if you remember, guys, at the U20 World Cup, of course, this is U21 and also U23, but they did finish in a good position to the U20 World Cup that happened in Argentina a couple of months ago, last year, actually. They finished in third, and they were also losing semifinalists at the U21 championship that England had won. And because England is not, of course, the United Kingdom, well, we're not going to go into a big political debate on that, but they have not been participating, and that means Israel were moved up. So obviously, Rob, I'll go to you on this one first. It's a very interesting group. I think it's an accessible one. I think in comparison of the other groups like, France, USA, New Zealand, and then a team from Asia or Africa. Argentina have to play a team from Asia, Morocco, and Ukraine. And then Group C, you have Spain, Egypt, and the Dominican Republic. So it could have been worse for Paraguay in this case, but nevertheless, I think when you look at it mainly through, and yes, they won't travel as much. They have to play in Bordeaux in the first game, and then they'll play their last two group stage games at the Parc des Princes in Paris. So that's at least one kind of advantage. But I think Paraguay could really fancy themselves to get an advance to the knockout stage of the Olympic Games.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if we spoke about it at the time, but I was definitely thinking this is when the South American teams are always very strong in this, in kind of youth tournaments. And so really, if you qualify through to the international tournament from your qualifiers in South America at youth stage, you've got a very good team, and you're actually one of the best teams in the world kind of already, because it's just the standard is so high, and Paraguay are coming in as champions as well. So I think they will feel that they can definitely take the games to Mali and Israel, and then we'll see who they get from AFC. I mean, that could be tricky. I think Japan, is it, that have a very good youth setup at the moment, so that might be a tricky one if they were to win, but we don't know who they're playing yet. I think there's a lot of positives. There's now a few question marks. I guess we'll go into it in a moment, but there's a few question marks of who will be able to play, because will they have to go into Copa America? So will this team that we saw that won the championship in South America, is it going to be pulled apart a little bit? Probably there'll be at least 2, maybe 3 players that we can't see. But ultimately, most of that squad stays together, and they'll be bringing in the overage players as another thing we don't know yet, but that will be interesting to see who's going to France as well in terms of senior players that can also help out. And yeah, I'd feel quietly confident that they can definitely progress to the next round. I'm happy they avoided Spain and France, of course. That would have been a totally different story. And just a quick note on Mali, I think is really interesting, because you actually have 2 Malian players in Paraguay. They play for Cerro Porteño. One of them made his, not his senior debut, played before, but he was in the senior side, Dramane Diarra. They've both played under 20s for Mali. So I'm wondering if you would see, which would be very funny, like a Cerro head-to-head in that Paraguay-Mali game. So look out for that, which is something I guess we didn't expect.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting, Ralph. There is a couple of players, African players here playing here in Paraguay, and they could face Paraguay eventually if the coach wants to count them in. I'm looking more into our team than the teams that we're going to play against, actually, because after the success we had in the Pre-Olímpico, Diego Gomez team wants nothing to do with the Olympics. I mean, they do not want to let go of him for both competitions. So it is a problem right now. And we heard Daniel Gardero on his press conference before going to Russia saying, I'm the coach of the senior national team. I'm the one that takes the best players. And that one of the best players is Diego Gomez right now. And he was very clear about that situation. So as of right now, Diego Gomez is only going to play the Copa America. And he was our star player. He was the best player for Paraguay in the Pre-Olímpico. So I'm looking into this squad and I'm thinking, who can take that role? Now, who's going to take over? Who's going to be the star in the midfield? And I don't know if we're going to have to maybe look into another player to fill in that spot. Maybe someone that's over 23 even, maybe a Kaku Romero or something like that. I don't know. I think Carlos Harazaguer now has to look into those senior players and maybe seeing if somebody can get that permission from their clubs to play Copa America and also play the Olympics. I think that's going to be vital. I think that's going to be very important for our opportunities, to be honest, in the group stage, and obviously to try to aim for a medal, which is what Paraguay wants to do. We've already got the silverware. We want to aim for minimum, again, silverware, or go for the gold one. But obviously you're going to have teams that are going to have, like France, they're going to bring in their best stuff. Argentina is also probably going to take Messi, so we got to take a couple of our stars also. Hopefully Julio Enciso, hopefully Enzo Gonzalez also is going to be there. I'm hoping for all of our best players to be there. The good thing right now is most of the players that came back from the local league that were playing under that under 23 team, most of them have been playing in their teams, so that's good for them. They keep on getting the rhythm. They're staying hot, and that's very important for them for the competition. And they're gonna have a couple of friendlies in the country, like we said. They're getting ready, Roberto. So I'm staying with these guys. I'm staying with the coach, and I'm liking what I'm seeing so far from the preparations for what's coming up. It's going to be an interesting summer in France, no doubt about it. And hopefully Paraguay can pull through this group stage, which looks very hard. But after what they did in the Paralympico, we're believing in this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've kind of beaten off, or at least have been able to get results against the big powerhouses in South America. Who's to say they can't do it against teams from Africa, Asia, and even Europe as well? So we'll have to wait and see. And yeah, of course, they played the Dominican Republic. That team is also going to the Olympics as well. So it will get a chance for both these teams to see how they assess themselves in their chances of going in their group stage at the Olympics. As we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision, for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.